war between humans and the Valerians had lasted so long that most soldiers had forgotten why it started. They only knew how to fight, how to survive another day, and how to follow orders. Planets that once had oceans and cities had turned into wastelands. The skies of every world they fought on burned red with the reflection of endless fire. Captain Elias Ward stood on the broken walls of Halvern III, one of the last human colonies near the outer rim. It had been a beautiful place once, filled with crystal towers and green parks. Now it was silent except for the sound of distant explosions. Smoke rose from the ruins, covering the horizon in a dark fog. The air was thick with dust and ash. Every breath tasted like metal. Elias's helmet display flickered with static. His unit had been ordered to defend the city until reinforcements arrived, but communication had broken hours ago. He tried to reach his team through the radio, but all he heard was the empty hum of interference. He was alone now, or at least he thought so. The silence was heavy, almost too calm for a battlefield. He moved slowly across the shattered street. His boots crunched over glass and debris. The buildings around him were hollow skeletons, torn open by plasma fire. A flag half-burned hung from a pole, waving weakly in the wind. Elias looked up. Through the smoke he could see the faint shimmer of Valerian ships in the sky. Their engines glowed with cold blue light, moving like silent predators through the clouds. He checked his weapon, even though he had little ammunition left. The last thing he wanted was to die here, alone, forgotten. But deep down, a part of him had already accepted that it might end that way. The war had taken everything, his home, his friends, even his belief that humanity could win. He fought because he had to, not because he believed victory was possible anymore. Then he heard something, a soft crack of movement. He froze instantly and aimed his rifle toward the sound. A shadow moved through the smoke, tall and slender. For a second he thought it might be one of his men, but the shape was wrong. The figure stepped into view and Elias felt his heart pound. It was a Valerian. Her armor gleamed faintly under the dim light, silver with lines of violet energy running through it. The design was beautiful but frightening, smooth and sharp like something grown, not built. Her helmet retracted, revealing a face that was alien yet strangely human in form. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes glowed faintly like liquid metal. Behind her, several Valerian soldiers appeared, each holding long energy rifles. Elias immediately took cover behind a half-destroyed transport, his pulse racing. He had faced Valerians before, but never this close without the cover of chaos or heavy fire. He knew how fast they could move, how deadly their weapons were. He was outnumbered and outmatched. The commander raised her hand slightly and her soldiers stopped. Her gaze moved across the battlefield and fixed on the transport where Elias was hiding. She knew he was there. He gripped his weapon tighter. His mind screamed at him to stay still, to wait for a chance, but his training told him something else. Never let the enemy corner you. He rose suddenly and aimed. But before he could fire, a glowing beam hit the ground near his feet. The shockwave threw dust and heat into the air. He fell backward, the rifle clattering from his hands. When he looked up again, the Valerian soldiers had spread out, forming a semicircle around him. Elias knew it was over. He slowly reached for his sidearm, even though he knew it would make no difference. The Valerian commander stepped closer, her boots sinking into the ash-covered ground. Her face was calm, her expression unreadable. She looked at him as if trying to understand something. Elias met her gaze. For a long moment, neither moved. The only sound was the soft hiss of wind moving through the ruins. He could see the reflection of fire in her eyes, and in that reflection he saw himself. Tired, broken, and yet still standing. He didn't know why he did it. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the madness of being the last man alive on a ruined world. But instead of raising his weapon again, he did something simple. He smiled. It wasn't a confident smile or a mocking one. It was weak, tired, almost sad, but it was real. A small piece of humanity that still lived inside him. The Valerian commander froze. Her soldiers looked at each other, confused. No human had ever smiled at them on the battlefield. Every encounter was filled with rage, fear, or hate, but never something like this. She lowered her weapon slightly. The silver light in her eyes dimmed as she stared at him. In her language, she said something softly, words that the translator in Elias's helmet couldn't fully process. Then she switched to the human tongue, her voice accented but clear. "Leave him," she said. Her soldiers hesitated. One of them stepped forward as if to argue, but she raised her hand sharply. I said leave him. The Valerians obeyed without another word. One by one, they lowered their rifles. The energy field around them flickered off, and the violet glow on their armor faded to a dull hum. They turned and began walking away through the smoke, their forms disappearing into the mist like ghosts. Elias stayed still, not daring to move. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. Every rule of war, every piece of logic told him that he should be dead right now. But the commander had spared him. She lingered for a moment longer, watching him. Then she said something again, so quietly he almost didn't hear it. Not all of us want this. Before he could reply, she turned and walked away. Her armor shimmered one last time in the faint light, and then she was gone. Elias sat there for a long time trying to process what had happened. The air around him was still heavy with smoke, but it felt different now, quieter, almost peaceful. He looked at the sky, where faint trails of ships disappeared into orbit. He wondered what her name was. He wondered why she had done it. Maybe she saw something in him that reminded her of her own people. Maybe she was tired of killing. Maybe that one simple smile had reached something deep inside her, something that no weapon could destroy. He stood up slowly and looked around. The battlefield was empty now. The ruins were silent, but the silence no longer felt hopeless. For the first time in months, Elias felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. He found a piece of glass on the ground, its surface cracked but still reflective. He looked at his own face in it. There was dust and blood smeared across his skin, but there was also a faint trace of that same smile. It was strange, he thought. One moment of human emotion had stopped an enemy commander in her tracks. It hadn't come from a weapon or strategy or command. It came from something far simpler, the ability to see another living being as more than just an enemy. He knew he had to tell someone. Maybe his superiors wouldn't believe him. Maybe they would call him delusional. But he couldn't let the story die here. There was a meaning behind what had happened, something that went beyond orders and uniforms. As the sun began to rise over the broken horizon, the light touched the ruins and made them glow faintly. Elias picked up his rifle and started walking. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he had to move. He couldn't let the moment fade into dust. Behind him, the wind blew gently through the empty streets. The war was still raging somewhere far away. But here, in this small corner of the universe, something had changed. He had seen compassion in the eyes of the enemy. And maybe, just maybe, that was where peace would begin. Days turned into weeks after the strange encounter on Halvern 3. But Captain Elias Ward could not forget what happened. He tried to move on, to treat it like any other mission that had gone wrong or any other battle that had ended in confusion. But something deep inside him kept replaying that moment, the way she looked at him, the sound of her voice when she ordered her troops to leave him alive. It was not mercy in the usual sense. It was something more personal, something that did not belong on a battlefield. He was rescued 2 days later by a passing human patrol. The soldiers found him near the ruins of the old central square, alive but shaken. When they asked him how he had survived, he could only say, "They let me go." Some laughed, others didn't believe him. A few looked at him with pity, assuming that trauma had made him imagine things. But Elias knew what he saw. Back on Prometheus Station, the largest human military base orbiting a dying red star, he sat through endless debriefings. The officers listened carefully at first, but their faces grew cold as he described the Valerian commander. "You're saying she spared you?" one of them asked, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Yes," Elias said. "She ordered her soldiers to stand down. She spoke to me." "Captain Ward," another officer interrupted, "you've been through heavy fire and isolation. You may be experiencing confusion due to oxygen deprivation or stress. Valerians don't take prisoners, let alone show mercy." Elias clenched his fists. "She did. I saw it." The room was silent for a moment. Then the commanding officer sighed. "We'll mark it as an anomaly in your report." An anomaly. That was what they called it. To them, it was easier to dismiss his story than to believe that an alien enemy, one raised in a culture built on conquest, could choose compassion. He spent the following days walking through the narrow corridors of the station. The lights were dim, the air recycled, the walls echoing with announcements of new battles and lost outposts. The war was far from over. Every day, transport ships carried wounded soldiers back from the front lines, and every night new units departed to replace them. Elias felt trapped in a loop of endless destruction, yet something inside him refused to go back to the way things were. He started searching through the military database, looking for any mention of a Valyrian commander operating near Halvern 3. Most of the files were encrypted, but after years in the field, he knew how to read between lines. There were scattered reports from reconnaissance drones, describing a female Valyrian leader who had withdrawn her forces from several human sectors without reason. Her name appeared once, Commander Solara of the Valyrian Ninth Fleet. Elias felt a chill when he saw it. She had a name now, something real to hold on to. He began collecting every piece of data he could find: battle maps, intercepted transmissions, and communications between Valyrian warships. The more he read, the more convinced he became that Solara was different. Her fleet fought defensively, protecting civilians, avoiding unnecessary destruction. It was unlike anything the Valyrians had done before. He tried to share his findings with his superiors, but no one cared. "Captain Ward," his commander told him sternly, "your duty is to fight, not to chase fantasies about alien mercy. The Valyrians want us extinct. Don't forget that." Elias nodded outwardly, but inside he disagreed. He had seen something that could not be erased by orders. One night, as the station's lights dimmed to simulate dusk, he sat in the mess hall, staring at the stars beyond the observation window. His reflection in the glass looked older than he remembered. Tired eyes, a scar running along his jaw, the kind of face shaped by too many battles. He was lost in thought when a voice behind him spoke quietly. "You're the one who survived Halvern 3, aren't you?" Elias turned. A woman in a pilot's uniform stood there, holding a datapad. She looked cautious, as if afraid to be overheard. "That's me," he said carefully. She sat down across from him. "I read your report. Everyone thinks it's impossible. But I don't," he frowned. "Why?" She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Because I've seen the same thing. 2 months ago, our squadron intercepted a Valyrian patrol near the edge of Sector T-59. They had us surrounded, but instead of finishing us, they pulled back. No explanation. It was like they didn't want to fight." Elias's heart raced. Was it her fleet? The pilot hesitated, then nodded. "Commander Solara." That name came up in our debriefing logs. For a moment, they sat in silence. The noise of the mess hall faded around them. Both of them knew that something bigger was happening. The Valyrians were changing, or at least some of them were. Later that night, Elias stood in the communications room, staring at the flickering lights of encrypted transmissions. He wasn't supposed to be there, but curiosity had always been stronger than caution. Using access codes he had learned in his years of service, he managed to intercept fragments of Valyrian messages. Most were unreadable, but one caught his attention. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. "Endless war destroys us all. We must seek another path." The message was signed with a single code, S9. He didn't need to guess who it was. "Commander." Solara was sending signals of peace within her own ranks. Elias knew he couldn't ignore it. If she was truly trying to stop the war, he had to find her. But doing that would mean defying orders, crossing enemy territory, and risking execution for treason if he was caught. Still, the decision came easily. He had nothing left to lose. A week later, Elias requested assignment on a reconnaissance mission to the Valyrian border. It was approved without suspicion. After all, he was one of the best field captains in the fleet. But once he left Prometheus Station, he changed his course. With only 2 trusted crew members, Lieutenant Merrick and the same pilot Lyra, he entered Valyrian-controlled space under stealth mode. The journey was long and dangerous. They passed through debris fields where broken ships drifted like dead bones in the darkness. They hid from patrols moving silently between asteroids, their ship cloaked in cold. Every hour felt like a lifetime. During the quiet moments, Elias found himself thinking about Solara. He imagined her standing in the ruins, looking at him the same way she had that day. What had she seen in his smile that made her stop? He didn't know, but he wanted to. Meanwhile, far away aboard the Valyrian flagship Ereva's Light, Solara stood alone in the observation chamber, looking at the spiral of a distant galaxy. The light reflected softly against her silver eyes. Her second-in-command entered quietly. "Commander, the Council is questioning your recent withdrawals. They say the humans will think us weak. Let them think what they wish," she said calmly. Strength is not measured by how many worlds we burn. But if they learn of your messages, they will, she interrupted. And when they do, I will stand by them. Her officer bowed and left. Solara turned back to the stars. She thought of the human who had smiled at her. It was an image she couldn't erase, no matter how hard she tried. In that moment on the battlefield, she had seen a truth the war had hidden, a truth that both their species had forgotten. They were not so different after all. She had been trained from birth to see humans as dangerous, unpredictable creatures, yet when she looked at him, she saw something familiar: fear, courage, compassion. That one expression had made her question everything she believed. She didn't know if he had survived after that battle. But part of her hoped he had. When Elias's ship finally reached the coordinates near Valerian space, the crew was exhausted. Their stealth systems were weakening, and one more mistake could expose them. "Are you sure about this?" Lyra asked quietly. "If they find us, we'll never make it home." Elias nodded. "If she's trying to end this war, then meeting her is worth any risk." The ship descended toward a quiet moon orbiting a dying star. It was a forgotten place, no colonies, no bases, just silence. The perfect place for two enemies to meet. As they approached the surface, their scanners picked up faint energy readings. Valerian technology. A single shuttle was already there waiting. Elias took a deep breath. "She came," he whispered. For the first time in years, he felt something close to relief. All the fear, all the doubt faded for a moment. There, on that lonely moon, he would finally meet the one who had spared his life. The one whose single act of mercy had set in motion something greater than war. He didn't know what would happen next. Maybe it was a trap. Maybe it would all end in fire. But somewhere in his heart he believed it wouldn't, because he remembered the way she had looked at him. And he remembered that a single smile had changed everything once before. The moon was silent except for the soft hum of the engines as Captain Elias Ward's ship landed. The surface was gray and cold, covered in layers of ancient dust that glowed faintly under the light of the dying star above. As the ship's ramp lowered, a quiet wind moved across the barren land, carrying with it a strange stillness that felt almost sacred. Elias stepped out slowly, his helmet reflecting the soft light. Behind him, Lieutenant Merrick and Pilot Lyra waited for his signal, both uneasy but loyal. He raised a hand to stop them. "Stay here," he said softly. "If anything happens, you take off. Don't wait for me," Merrick frowned. "You really think she'll come alone?" Elias looked out across the horizon where a faint shimmer of blue light marked the arrival of another vessel. "She kept her word once," he said quietly. "I have to believe she will again." The Valerian shuttle landed a short distance away, kicking up dust that hung in the thin air like fog. Its sleek design was unmistakable, curved like a living creature moving almost gracefully as it settled. The ramp opened, and out stepped the figure he had seen in his memories 100 times, Commander Solara. Her armor was lighter now, almost ceremonial, glowing with gentle shades of silver and violet. She wore no helmet and her face was calm, unreadable, but her eyes held something familiar. Elias's heart raced as he walked toward her, his boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. They stopped a few meters apart, the space between them filled with the quiet hum of their ships. For a long time neither spoke. It was strange, how the galaxy had burned for years with endless fighting, yet this single, fragile moment felt more powerful than any war. "You came," she said finally, her voice soft but steady. "I had to," Elias replied. "You spared me once. I need to know why." Solara tilted her head slightly, her silver eyes studying him. "Because I saw something that day," she said. "Something I thought your kind had lost." "What was that?" "A choice," she said. "You smiled at me even when you were facing death." It was not fear. It was not hatred. It was humanity. I remembered then that we Valerians were once like that too. Her words hit him deeply. For months he had searched for meaning behind that moment, and now hearing her speak of it made it real again. Elias lowered his weapon, though he hadn't truly meant to use it. "If you believe that," he said, "then why are your fleet still fighting? Why are people still dying?" Solara's expression darkened. "Because not all see what I saw. The High Command believes peace is weakness. They say we must cleanse the galaxy to survive. But I know that path leads only to extinction for both of us." Elias took a step closer. "Then we stop it. Together. She looked surprised, as if she hadn't expected him to say that so easily. "You would trust me?" "I already did," he said simply. "The moment you told your soldiers to leave me alive." The wind whispered between them, carrying dust across the empty ground. Solara glanced toward the sky, where distant flashes marked ongoing battles in orbit. "If either side finds out about this meeting," she said, "we will both be branded traitors." Elias nodded. "Then let's make it worth it." They talked for hours beneath the pale light of the dying star. Elias told her how humans had begun to lose faith in the war, how soldiers were tired of endless death. Solara spoke of her people's growing doubts, how even Valerian families whispered about peace but were too afraid to voice it. They both realized something important. There was a chance, small but real, to change everything. If they could deliver a message together, a sign that both sides wanted to stop, it might spread faster than any command. Solara's eyes softened as she listened. "You still believe peace is possible?" she asked quietly. Elias smiled faintly. "I have to. It's the only reason I'm still alive." For the first time, she smiled too, a small, delicate expression that carried more warmth than any sun. But that peace did not last long. Lyra's voice suddenly came through Elias's earpiece. "Captain, we've got incoming signals. Human and Valerian patrols. They've locked on our coordinates." Elias turned sharply, looking at Solara. She already knew. Her wrist device flickered with red warning lights. "They found us," she said. "They must have tracked my shuttle. Can we stop them?" "No," she said, her tone firm but calm. "But we can give them something they can't destroy." Solara moved quickly toward her shuttle, motioning for Elias to follow. Inside, her control panels glowed with hundreds of lines of code. "This system connects directly to the Valerian military networks," she explained. "If we send a joint broadcast, it will reach both sides before they can jam it." Elias nodded, activating his own wristpad. "We'll merge it with the human channels. Every soldier out there will hear it." Solara hesitated for a second, looking at him. "Once we do this, there's no going back. They will hunt us both." Elias met her eyes. "They already do." Together, they began recording. Elias spoke first, his voice steady and clear. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the human fleet. I'm standing beside Commander Solara of the Valerian 9th. We have fought each other for years. But today we choose to speak, not fight." Solara continued seamlessly, her tone calm but filled with strength. "We have both seen what endless war brings. There is no victory in extinction. There is another path, one that begins when we see each other not as enemies but as living beings." They sent the message. It spread faster than light through military relays and communication satellites. Soldiers on both sides paused as their screens flickered with the image of two figures, one human, one Valerian, standing side by side. For the first time, the faces of enemies looked like symbols of hope. Then the alarms began to blare. Ships were approaching from orbit, weapons charged. The ground trembled as explosions lit the far horizon. Solara turned to him. "They won't let us live." Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but they'll remember us." She looked at him for a long moment. "I never thought a human would teach me peace," she said softly. "And I never thought a Valerian would show me mercy," he replied. Outside, the sky filled with light as missiles streaked through the atmosphere. Their ships began to shake under the impact waves. Lyra's voice cried through the comm again. "Captain, we have to go now." Elias turned to Solara. "Come with us," she shook her head. "If I go, they'll keep hunting you. I can hold them off long enough for you to escape." "I'm not leaving you," Elias said firmly. For the first time, emotion flashed in her eyes. "You must. The message is out. That's what matters. Go." He wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her face. She was right. Elias placed his hand briefly against hers, a simple gesture that said more than words could. Then he turned and ran back toward his ship as Solara activated the defense shields around her shuttle. Bright energy barriers rose around her like walls of light. As Elias's ship lifted off, he looked back one last time. Solara stood in the open, her armor glowing like a star against the gray surface. The enemy ships descended upon her position, their beams cutting through the dust. But before they struck, a final pulse of light erupted from her shuttle, jamming every sensor and signal in the area. Then, silence. The explosion that followed lit up the moon's surface like dawn. Elias stared through the viewport, his chest heavy but calm. He didn't need to know if she had survived. What she had done was enough. Their message had already reached the galaxy. Back on Prometheus Station days later, the human command was in chaos. Some called the transmission treason, others called it hope. And far away, in the Valerian capital, crowds gathered demanding to know why their commander's last broadcast spoke of peace instead of war. The fire that had burned for so many years began to fade, replaced by questions, by doubt, by possibility. Elias spent his days watching the stars from a quiet outpost far from the front lines. The war had not ended overnight, but it had changed. There were fewer battles now, more negotiations, more whispers of truce. He often wondered what Solara would think if she could see it. Sometimes, when he looked up at the night sky, he imagined her somewhere out there, alive, watching the same stars, remembering the same moment. One smile had started it all. A single, human smile that made an enemy stop and think. A single choice that proved compassion could be stronger than fear. The galaxy would go on to write stories about them, about the soldier and the alien who defied their armies, who stood together in a place where war should have ended them both. And though many names were forgotten, theirs were whispered for generations. Because long after the fires of war had cooled, and long after the fleets had gone silent, people still remembered that peace began not with victory, but with a single smile,